Okay, this is a quick video that goes through what's involved in Edexcel Paper 2, the National and Global Economy. It's a 2-hour paper, 100 marks again. So you've got 120 minutes for 100 marks. So I think the intention is that you spend 20 minutes reading the extracts and thinking about the essay. And then it's a mark from then. So let's look at this one then. It follows more or less the same pattern as paper 1, which was the micro paper. This paper obviously is macro, so it's testing theme 2 and theme 4. So let's have a look at this bad boy. So it starts off with section A. There's 25 marks in section A. They reckon it should take you 30 minutes. I would say try and do it in 25 or less. This is the easy part of the paper. You should be trying to max out here and get 25 out of 25. I think this part of the paper is really designed to discriminate between candidates who are in the E, D, C sort of area. If you're hoping for an A star, A, B, you need to be getting 25 out of 25 here, because it's just really factual recall and a bit of logic and some number processing, graph interpretation, and you're there. So we've got a multiple choice. That's the theme 4 topic about free trade. Pretty easy. A 4-mark question that asks you to do a bit of explaining. Again, it's a theme 4 international trade question. Pretty easy multiple choice question about aggregate demand. So theme 2 there. Drawing a diagram. Money for old rope. What else have we got? A chart showing the balance of payments, current account, a calculation, easy. Another explain for 2, multiple choice, explain. So this is just factual recall and a tiny little bit of analysis. Again, same thing, explain. So I think one of the differences that you can see here between section A on paper 2 and section A on paper 1 is that with the paper 2 there's less maths and there's more kind of explaining. Oops, let's get the page going down. Okay, so again we have a calculation. We've got some index numbers, calculate the index number, easy peasy. So that's section A done. Then we get to section B. So chart. This is the hard bit of the paper. You can't just skim read this. You've got to really understand what's going on. And I think having good background knowledge will help massively here, because you'll already be familiar with most of these stories. If you're a gamer or a social media addict and you don't know much about what's going on in the world, you're going to find this really, really difficult if you don't know what the backstory is. The extracts themselves, they don't tend to be, how can I put it? They don't come up with too many wild cards. Most of the themes that they choose have been in the news. So if you've been watching, reading, or listening to the news, you kind of understand where most of this is going to in the extract. In this case, it's about globalization. There's a lot of dialogue cliche stuff, but a lot of students don't know these things because they're not exposing themselves to the news, or they're not doing any background reading. Extract B, topic of inequality. Obviously, that's been in the news. The arguments about what's caused it. Again, what they'll do is they'll construct extracts that tap into these kind of standard arguments that are wheeled out by The Guardian or Channel 4 News. So again, you'll find it a hell of a lot easier to wade through this extract quickly, understand what's going on. The other thing as well is that they want you to apply your answers to this context, so you've got to understand what's being communicated to you in the extract. You can't ignore it and write generic answers, because most of the questions are marked according to a levels of response mark scheme. And if you write generic stuff, you're going to be trapped in the lower levels of response. Not good. Okay, so then we get the questions. So we start off 6A as before with the micro paper. 6A on the micro was also an explain question for 5 marks. On that question, I think there was 3 marks for analysis, and you'll see here, again, it's quite frustrating really, because in this case you've got 2 knowledge, 2 application, 1 analysis. If you were so inclined and you were maybe set a question like this for homework and you wanted to cheat, which you shouldn't really do, well, not shouldn't, definitely not do, you know, you write out the mark scheme here and you get it all in the right order, and you can probably score 5 out of 5 quite easily, because it's not marked according to a levels of response mark scheme. 6B is an examine question worth 8 marks. So again, that's marked in exactly the same way as an 8 mark examine in paper 1. So there are 6 marks for KAA. To score those 6 marks, you've got to construct 2 themes worth 3 marks each. And within that 3 marks, there's 1 mark for knowledge, for basically saying what your factor is, 1 mark for applying your factor, and 1 mark for analysing it. Then what you do is go into your second factor, state it, apply it, analyse it. What I would do is use paragraphs. So first paragraph is my first KAA factor. Leave a line, a blank line. There's loads of space in the answer book. Help the examiner to help you. Make it really easy for them to follow the logic of your argument. So state your first KAA theme, leave a line, do your second theme, leave a line. Then you can get into your evaluation. There's 2 marks. So either 2 throwaway bits of judgment. In this case, generic is perfectly okay. There's only 2 marks. Or you could try and write 1 evaluative theme in a bit more depth. Theoretically, you can get 2 marks from that as well. For me personally, I probably would go with 2 throwaways. It's probably the more reliable way of getting the marks there. Okay, so now we move into C. With reference to extract A, discuss 2 macroeconomic policies. So it's a discussed question worth 12. At this point, we move into levels of response mark schemes. So let's have a look at this bit of the mark scheme. You know, this is the point where cheating is not going to help you at all. So if you just kind of write out some of this stuff, then you know you'll be in level 1 or the lower reaches of level 2. So let's read what the descriptor for level 1 is. Displays isolated or imprecise knowledge and understanding of terms, concepts, theories and models. Use of generic or irrelevant information or examples. So descriptive approach, which has no chains of reasoning or links between causes and consequences. So this type of student, they don't know their stuff, not because they're thick, but because they didn't do any consolidation work over the year. They just rocked up to lessons, learnt it all, walked away from the lesson feeling pleased with themselves, thought that they would remember it all, but maybe a month out before the exam, they thought, maybe I should do some revision. And at that point, they thought, oh dear, I've forgotten all of this stuff. And their last minute revision wasn't good enough, so their knowledge isn't good enough. So it doesn't really matter how much they write. If their knowledge is isolated or imprecise, you're trapped in level 1, which is the maximum 2 out of 8. Also, no attempt to apply your answer, your theory, to the context of the question means that your answer is generic. That also is really desperate. You do not want to write unapplied answers that are generic, because you'll get bashed for that. the most you'll be able to score is 2 out of 8 for the KAA. Okay, level 2, so a little bit better, displays elements of knowledge rather than isolated knowledge, so you know a little bit more. So you know something about economic principles, concepts and theories that you've been taught, but maybe your knowledge is still a little bit woolly, it's not crystal clear. You've done some application, but you've not really focused on the broad elements of the question, or not fully focused on it. A narrow response. In this case, they asked you to come up with 2 themes. Maybe you only came up with 1. If you do that, you're going to be trapped in level 2 and capped at 5 out of 8. Maybe you've got some chains of reasoning, but they're not particularly accurate or spot on to actually what the question was asking you. Level 3 is where you want to be. So to get full marks, you need to demonstrate accurate knowledge and understanding of the concepts, principles and models. So you know your stuff. You're also able to apply it, ability to link knowledge and understanding in context using relevant and focused examples which are fully integrated. And you've got logical and coherent chains of reasoning. And the economics that you used, you carefully selected it so that it was answering the question that was actually set, rather than the question that Econ plus Dahl predicted off YouTube. Okay, so that's the KAA. There are 4 marks for evaluation, so if you just write down a few bullet points, like you crib the mark scheme, then you can cry all you want to be, but you'll be in level 1 because you've just wrote some generic, unexplained stuff. There was no logic chain there. You're in level 1. End of story. But I wrote out the mark scheme. Tough. There's no logic chain there. You've just made some unsubstantiated judgments. To get into level 2, your judgments, your evaluative comments, are supported by relevant reasoning. So you've explained your judgments. You've not made unsubstantiated assertions. You've actually analysed your evaluation. And where applicable, you're able to recognise that maybe new classical economists might have a different take on things to Keynesians. That might not always be relevant, but some questions that could be a good way of scoring level 2 evaluation. So let's move on. So we're into 6D. So D is an assess question, and it's worth 10 marks. So you should know by now that we're looking here for 6 marks of KAA and 4 marks of evaluation. To get the KAA, I'd probably go for 2 themes, and I would probably aim for sort of 2 evaluation points as well. You could put all your evaluation at the end, or you could go KAA, then evaluate it, then your second KAA, then evaluate it. With this type of question, it doesn't really make much difference which way you go on that. So again, let's look at the mark scheme. So this is for the KAA. So again, it's very similar. It's almost the same. So level 1, you don't really know your stuff. You're not applying it, so it's generic. You're not really explaining any logic chains. So a pretty poor answer means that the most you can score is 2 out of 6, which is a third, which is 33%, which is a fail basically. So level 1 equals failure. You don't want to be in level 1. You need to know your stuff, you need to apply, and you need to be able to analyse and construct logic chains. Level 2 displays elements of knowledge and understanding of economic principles, concepts and theories. There's some application there, but you're not fully applying it to the question. There's some application, but maybe there's a few loose ends there. Maybe your answer's also narrow in that you've missed out on some big themes that they would have expected you to pick up on. Maybe you only focused in on one possible element of the answer, and you missed out on something else that was pretty important. Level 3, you've got accurate knowledge. You understand economics, you understand the principles, the concepts, the economic models. You're able to apply it, and you're able to construct logic chains. So that's where you need to be to get into level 3. For the evaluation, again, it's exactly the same as with the 12 marker. So level 1, just some throwaway stuff. Oh, time lag, I don't know, extent. But you've not really explained why there might be a time lag in this case. It's completely unrelated to the context or unrealistic. You can write like pages and pages of that stuff, but if it's all of the same ilk, it's all generic, and it's none of it's really explained. It's just all like lists of points of unsubstantiated assertions, and there's no logic chain there. Tough. You're in level 1. And you can moan all you want. Oh, I wrote out the mark scheme. Well, yeah, that's right. So there's no logic chain then, is there? Okay, remember the mark scheme is meant for teachers who actually understand economics. They don't need to write out the logic chain. They just need to kind of write a few bullet points that give teachers who do the examining a rough idea of the kind of direction an answer might head. It's not a model answer. To get level 2 evaluation, your judgment needs to be supported by relevant reasoning. So again, you need to analyze your evaluation. You need to explain your judgments and get some logic chains going. It needs to be relevant to the context. The best judgments are always made in the context of the question. You need to do that to get into level 2. Also a recognition of different viewpoints, if that's relevant. Okay, so what else have we got? I think we're on to the 15 mark one now. As I say, the main thing is just making sure you can read through the text quickly. That actually brings me on to another point. You need to read. If you're not a reader, you're going to really struggle with this exam. Because if you're not used to reading, you're not used to being able to assimilate massive blocks of text under time pressure and actually understand what's going on. If you just like read Instagram or just look at posts on social media, you're not developing the skills. So a good A-level student needs to do lots and lots of reading so that they develop these skills that they'll need in the exams. Because you can't revise excellent English comprehension skills. You need to constantly practice them, and if you don't practice them, you might have been good in the past, but those skills will just ebb away. Okay, so E is a 15 marker, so discuss. So we know evaluations involved. It's the split of marks is 9 for KAA and 6 for evaluation. So again, it's not points makes prizes. The mark scheme really is not going to help you too much if you're doing this for homework, because you need to be able to understand what's going on. And if you just write it out, then basically you're just going to get level 1 or level 2 for KAA. Okay, so level 1 displays isolated or imprecise knowledge and understanding of terms, concepts, theories, and models. Again, this is getting a bit repetitive, but if you don't know your stuff, you're goosed. You need to apply it, so if you're generic, you're in level 1. Again, understanding what's going on in the real world is massively important. And then also being able to construct logic chains. If you don't, and you make unsubstantiated assertions, or you jump important steps in your analysis, you're confined to level 3. Level 2 is a little bit better than level 1, so you know some stuff, you're applying it a little bit. Maybe your answer's quite narrow in that, for a question like this, a 15 marker, you're probably looking at 2 or 3 KAA themes. Maybe you've only got 1 theme, so your answer's deemed to be narrow. So one more time, for a 15 mark question, you probably want 3 KAA themes. If you only write 1, KAA theme, your answer might deem to be narrow. That's no good. You know, you're in level 2. So maybe 2 could do, 3, but definitely no more than 3, because if you're writing more than 3, you won't have enough time. And if you're trying to cover too much ground, you'll cover that ground too thinly. It will be too superficial, and you'll be in level 1. So 2 or 3 KAA themes is about right for a 15-mark evaluation question. Level 3, again, you're knowing your stuff, you've demonstrated accurate knowledge of economics, you've applied your answers, and you're able to select your knowledge carefully so what you're writing about fits the question and fits the context. And crucially, you've demonstrated logical and coherent chains of reasoning. Okay, let's look at the evaluation. So there's 6 marks for that. So again, this is classic actually, because if you just look at the mark scheme, there's just a few bullet points there. If you just wrote out those bullet points, you're definitely in level 1, because there's no logical chain of reasoning there. If your evaluation is off the peg and generic, then that's no good. In fact, actually, we need to go to, sorry, I've just, yeah, sorry, there's the, it's the same point, there's just a list of bullet points on the mark scheme. To get to level 3 evaluation, you need to construct a logical argument. Your judgments can't be unexplained, they can't be unsupported assertions. There needs to be some relevant economics in there, where you've created a logic chain to explain your evaluation, to explain the judgments that you've made. You've not just pulled a judgment out of the fire and just whacked it on the page with no supporting evidence, with no supporting logic. Okay, so that is the end of section B. Section C is the essay bit of the paper. The modern name for that is extended response question. Let's have a quick look at that. Here it comes. So they reckon to spend 30 minutes on this. So again, time's really up against you. Notice that there's a stem to the question. What I mean by that is this highlighted bit here. This is the context. If I were you, you definitely need to read that and appreciate what's going on. Again, students that haven't really done any background reading, they don't read the news, watch the news, listen to the news, they're going to find that really, really difficult to write in context, because they just don't know enough. And then you've got the question itself. It's 25 marks. Do you do both? No. You pick one. So you read both questions and you decide which one you fancy, and you go for it. In terms of the marks, there are 16 marks for KAA and there are 9 marks for evaluation. I'd probably go for 3 KAA themes, and what I would do is I might briefly, if there's a term in the question that kind of would make sense to define, I would define it. Like in this case, I don't, for question 7, I don't think there's anything. I'm not going to waste any time defining government spending, seriously. So I'm just going to get straight into answering this question. So it's about government spending on infrastructure. So evaluate the likely economic effects. I'm just basically going to come up with 3 benefits of government spending on infrastructure. So after each benefit, I'm going to evaluate that benefit and say why that benefit might not arise or what it might depend on. So benefit, evaluation, benefit, evaluation, benefit, evaluation, final judgment, answer the question, put the pen down, done. So I'd also be very careful about paragraphing, help the examiner to help you. They're marking after a long day of teaching. They're probably through their second bottle of Merlot by the time they're answering or marking your paper. So help them to help you. So one more time, in this case you state your first benefit, leave a line, evaluate that first benefit, leave a line, write your second KAA theme, leave a line, evaluate your second KAA theme, leave a line, write your third KAA theme, leave a line, evaluate your third KAA theme, leave a line, final judgments, answer the question, and you're done. Okay, hopefully you found this reasonably useful.